Tonight, we drift into a quieter world, a world where ancient forests whisper secrets, and every word is a gentle bridge to peace. Whether it is a lesson of the heart, a hero's journey, or a dream from long ago, you don't need to follow every detail. You don't need to hold on to any thought. Just listen. Let the rhythm of the tale wash over you. And as your body grows heavy, let the magic of these stories carry you away into a deep and effortless sleep. The young giant. Once on a time, a countryman had a son who was as big as a thumb and did not become any bigger, and during several years did not grow 1 hair's breadth. Once, when the father was going out to plow, the little one said, "Father, I will go out with you." "Thou wouldst go out with me," said the father. "Stay here. Thou wilt be of no use out there. Besides, thou mightest get lost." Then Thumbling began to cry, and for the sake of peace, his father put him in his pocket and took him with him. When he was outside in the field, he took him out again and set him in a freshly cut furrow. Whilst he was there, a great giant came over the hill. "Do thou see that great buggy?" said the father, for he wanted to frighten the little fellow to make him good. "He is coming to fetch thee." The giant, however, had scarcely taken 2 steps with his long legs before he was in the furrow. He took up Little. Thumbling carefully, with 2 fingers, examined him, and without saying 1 word, went away with him. His father stood by, but could not utter a sound for terror, and he thought nothing else but that his child was lost, and that as long as he lived, he should never set eyes on him again. The giant, however, carried him home, suckled him, and Thumbling grew and became tall and strong after the manner of giants. When 2 years had passed, the old giant took him into the forest, wanted to try him, and said, "Pull up a stick for thyself." Then the boy was already so strong that he tore up a young tree out of the earth by the roots. But the giant thought, "We must do better than that," took him back again, and suckled him 2 years longer. When he tried him, his strength had increased so much that he could tear an old tree out of the ground. That was still not enough for the giant. He again suckled him for 2 years, and when he then went with him into the forest and said, "Now just tear up a proper stick for me," the boy tore up the strongest oak tree from the earth so that it split, and that was a mere trifle to him. "Now that will do," said the giant, "thou art perfect," and took him back to the field from whence he had brought him. His father was there, following the plow. The young giant went up to him and said, "Does my father See what a fine man his son has grown into." The farmer was alarmed and said, "No, thou art not my son. I don't want thee leave me. Truly, I am your son. Allow me to do your work. I can plow as well as you, nay better." "No, no, thou art not my son, and thou canst not plow. Go away." However, as he was afraid of this great man he left go of, the plow stepped back and stood at one side of the piece of land. Then the youth took the plow and just pressed it with one hand, but his grasp was so strong that the plow went deep into the earth. The farmer could not bear to see that, and called to him, "If thou art determined to plow, thou must not press so hard on it that makes bad work." The youth, however, unharnessed the horses and drew the plow himself, saying, "Just go home, father, and bid my mother make ready a large dish of food, and in the meantime I will go over the field." Then the farmer went home and ordered his wife to prepare the food. But the youth plowed the field, which was 2 acres large, quite alone. And then he harnessed himself to the harrow, and harrowed the whole of the land, using 2 harrows at once. When he had done it, he went into the forest, and pulled up 2 oak trees, laid them across his shoulders, and hung on them, 1 harrow behind and 1 before, and also 1 horse behind and 1 before, and carried all as if it had been a bundle of straw to his parents' house. When he entered the yard, his mother did not recognize him, and asked, "Who is that horrible tall man?" The farmer said, "That is our son." She said, "No, that cannot be our son. We never had such a tall one. Ours was a little thing." She called to him, "Go away. We do not want thee." The youth was silent, but led his horses to the stable, gave them some oats and hay, and all that they wanted. When he had done this, he went into the parlor, sat down on the bench, and said, "Mother, now I should like something to eat. Will it soon be ready?" Then she said, "Yes," and brought in 2 immense dishes full of food, which would have been enough to satisfy herself and her husband for a week. The youth, however, ate the whole of it himself, and asked if she had nothing more to set before him. "No," she replied, "that is all we have." But that was only a taste. I must have more. She did not dare to oppose him, and went and put a huge cauldron full of food on the fire, and when it was ready, carried it in. "At length come a few crumbs," said he, and ate all there was, but it was still not sufficient to appease his hunger. Then said he, "Father, that with you I shall never have food enough. If you will get me an iron staff which is strong, and which I cannot break against my knees, I will go out into the world." The farmer was glad to put his 2 horses in his cart, and fetched from the smith a staff so large and thick that the 2 horses could only just bring it away. The youth laid it across his knees, and snap, he broke it in 2 in the middle like a beanstalk, and threw it away. The father then harnessed 4 horses and brought a bar which was so long and thick that the 4 horses could only just drag it. The son snapped this also in twain against his knees, threw it away, and said, "Father, this can be of no use to me. You must harness more horses and bring a stronger staff." So the father harnessed 8 horses and brought one which was so long and thick that the 8 horses could only just carry it. When the son took it in his hand, he broke off a bit from the top of it also, and said, "Father, I see that you will not be able to procure me any such staff as I want. I will remain no longer with you." So he went away and gave out that he was a smith's apprentice. He arrived at a village wherein lived a smith who was a greedy fellow, who never did a kindness to anyone, but wanted everything for himself. The youth went into the smithy and asked if he needed a journeyman. "Yes," said the smith, and looked at him and thought, "That is a strong fellow who will strike out well and earn his bread." So he asked, "How much wages dost thou want?" "I don't want any at all," he replied. "Only every fortnight, when the other journeymen are paid, I will give thee 2 blows, and thou must bear them." The miser was heartily satisfied, and thought he would thus save much money. Next morning, the strange journeyman was to begin to work. But when the master brought the glowing bar, and the youth struck his first blow, the iron flew asunder, and the anvil sank so deep into the earth that there was no bringing it out again. Then the miser grew angry and said, "Oh, but I can't make any use of you. You strike far too powerfully. What will you have for the 1 blow?" Then said he, "I will only give you quite a small blow. That's all." And he raised his foot and gave him such a kick that he flew away over 4 loads of hay. Then he sought out the thickest iron bar in the smithy for himself, took it as a stick in his hand, and went onwards. When he had walked for some time, he came to a small farm, and asked the bailiff if he did not require a head servant. "Yes," said the bailiff. "I can make use of one. You look a strong fellow who can do something. How much a year do you want as wages?" He again replied that he wanted no wages at all, but that every year he would give him 3 blows, which he must bear. Then the bailiff was satisfied, for he too was a covetous fellow. Next morning, all the servants were to go into the wood, and the others were already up, but the head servant was still in bed. Then one of them called to him, "Get up, it is time. We are going into the wood, and thou must go with us." "Ah," said he quite roughly and surlily, "you may just go then. I shall be back again before any of you." Then the others went to the bailiff and told him that the headman was still lying in bed and would not go into the wood with them. The bailiff said they were to awaken him again and tell him to harness the horses. The headman, however, said as before, "Just go there. I shall be back again before any of you." And then he stayed in bed 2 hours longer. At length he arose from the feathers, but first he got himself 2 bushels of peas from the loft, made himself some broth, with them ate it at his leisure, and when that was done, went and harnessed the horses and drove into the wood. Not far from the wood was a ravine through which he had to pass. So he first drove the horses on, and then stopped them, and went behind the cart, took trees and brushwood, and made a great barricade so that no horse could get through. When he was entering the wood, the others were just driving out of it with their loaded carts to go home. Then said he to them, "Drive on. I will still get home before you do." He did not drive far into the wood, but at once tore 2 of the very largest trees of all out of the earth, threw them on his cart, and turned round. When he came to the barricade, the others were still standing there, not able to get through. "Don't you see," said he, "that if you had stayed with me, you would have got home just as quickly and would have had another hour's sleep?" He now wanted to drive on, but his horeses could not work their way through. So he unharnessed them, laid them on the top of the cart, took the shafts in his own hands, and pulled it all through. And he did this just as easily as if it had been laden with feathers. When he was over, he said to the others, "There you see, I have got over quicker than you," and drove on, and the others had to stay where they were. In the yard, however, he took a tree in his hand, showed it to the bailiff, and said, "Isn't that a fine bundle of wood?" Then said the bailiff to his wife, "The servant is a good one. If he does sleep long, he is still home before the others." Choice. So he served the bailiff for a year, and when that was over, and the other servants were getting their wages, he said it was time for him to take his too. The bailiff, however, was afraid of the blows which he was to receive, and earnestly entreated him to excuse him from having them. For rather than that, he himself would be head servant, and the youth should be bailiff. "No," said he, "I will not be a bailiff. I am head servant, and will remain so, but I will administer that which we agreed on." The bailiff was willing to give him whatsoever he demanded, but it was of no use. The head servant said no to everything. Then the bailiff did not know what to do, and begged for a fortnight's delay, for he wanted to find some way of escape. The head servant consented to this delay. The bailiff summoned all his clerks together, and they were to think the matter over and give him advice. The clerks pondered for a long time, but at last they said that no one was sure of his life with the head servant, for he could kill a man as easily as a midge, and that the bailiff ought to make him get into the well and clean it. And when he was down below, they would roll up one of the millstones which was lying there, and throw it on his head. And then he would never return to daylight. The advice pleased the bailiff, and the head servant was quite willing to go down the well. When he was standing down below at the bottom, they rolled down the largest millstone, and thought they had broken his skull. But he cried, "Chase away those hens from the well. They are scratching in the sand up there, and throwing the grains into my eyes so that I can't see." So the bailiff cried, "Shh, shh," and pretended to frighten the hens away. When the head servant had finished his work, he climbed up and said, "Just look what a beautiful necktie I have on." And behold, it was the millstone which he was wearing round his neck. The head servant now wanted to take his reward, but the bailiff again begged for a fortnight's delay. The clerks met together and advised him to send the head servant to the haunted mill to grind corn by night, for from thence, as yet, no man had ever returned in the morning alive. The proposal pleased the bailiff. He called the head servant that very evening and ordered him to take 8 bushels of corn to the mill and grind it that night, for it was wanted. So the head servant went to the loft and put 2 bushels in his right pocket and 2 in his left, and took 4 in a wallet, half on his back and half on his breast, and thus laden went to the haunted mill. The miller told him that he could grind there very well by day, but not by night, for the mill was haunted, and that up to the present time whosoever had gone into it at night had been found in the morning lying dead inside. He said, "I will manage it, just you go away to bed." Then he went into the mill and poured out the corn. About 11 o'clock, he went into the miller's room and sat down on the bench. When he had sat there a while, a door suddenly opened, and a large table came in. And on the table, wine and roasted meats placed themselves, and much good food besides. But everything came of itself, for no one was there to carry it. After this, the chairs pushed themselves up, but no people came, until all at once he beheld fingers which handled knives and forks, and laid food on the plates. But with this exception, he saw nothing, as he was hungry, and saw the food he too place himself at the table, ate with those who were eating, and enjoyed it. When he had had enough, and the others also had quite emptied their dishes, he distinctly heard all the candles being suddenly snuffed out, and as it was now pitch dark, he felt something like a buzz on the ear. Then he said, "If anything of that kind comes again, I shall strike out in return." And when he had received a second buzz on the ear, he too struck out, and so it continued the whole night. He took nothing without returning it, but repaid everything with interest, and did not lay about him in vain. At daybreak, however, everything ceased. When the miller had got up, he wanted to look after him, and wondered if he were still alive. Then the youth said, "I have eaten my fill, have received some boxes on the ears, but I have given some in return." The miller rejoiced, and said that the mill was now released from the spell, and wanted to give him much money as a reward. But he said, "Money I will not have, I have enough of it." So he took his meal on his back, went home, and told the bailiff that he had done what he had been told to do, and would now have the reward agreed on. When the bailiff heard that he was seriously alarmed and quite beside himself, he walked backwards and forwards in the room, and drops of perspiration ran down from his forehead. Then he opened the window to get some fresh air. But before he was aware, the head servant had given him such a kick that he flew through the window out into the air, and so far away that no one ever saw him again. Then said the head servant to the bailiff's wife, "If he does not come back, you must take the other blow." She cried, "No, no, I cannot bear it," and opened the other window, because drops of perspiration were running down her forehead. Then he gave her such a kick that she too flew out, and as she was lighter, she went much higher than her husband. Her husband cried, "Do come to me." But she replied, "Come thou to me, I cannot come to thee." And they hovered about there in the air, and could not get to each other. And whether they are still hovering about or not, I do not know. But the young giant took up his iron bar and went on his way. The singing, springing lark. There was once on a time a man who was about to set out on a long journey, and on parting, he asked his 3 daughters what he should bring back with him for them. Whereupon the eldest wished for pearls, the second wished for diamonds, but the third said, "Dear father, I should like a singing, soaring lark." The father said, "Yes, if I can get it, you shall have it," kissed all 3, and set out. Now, when the time had come for him to be on his way home again, he had brought pearls and diamonds for the 2 eldest, but he had sought everywhere in vain for a singing, soaring lark for the youngest, and he was very unhappy about it, for she was his favorite child. Then his road lay through a forest, and in the midst of it was a splendid castle, and near the castle stood a tree. But quite on the top of the tree, he saw a singing, soaring lark. "Aha, you come just at the right moment," and he said, quite delighted, and called to his servant to climb up and catch the little creature. But as he approached the tree, a lion leapt from beneath it, shook himself, and roared till the leaves on the trees trembled. "He who tries to steal my singing, soaring lark," he cried, "will I devour." Then the man said, "I did not know that the bird belonged to thee. I will make amends for the wrong I have done, and ransom myself with a large sum of money, only spare my life." The lion said, "Nothing can save thee, unless thou wilt promise to give me for mine own what first meets thee on thy return home. And if thou wilt do that, I will grant thee thy life, and thou shalt have the bird for thy daughter into the bargain." But the man hesitated and said, "That might be my youngest daughter. She loves me best, and always runs to meet me on my return home." The servant, however, was terrified and said, "Why should your daughter be the very one to meet you? It might as easily be a cat or dog." Then the man allowed himself to be over-persuaded, took the singing, soaring lark, and promised to give the lion whatsoever should first meet him on his return home. When he reached home and entered his house, the first who met him was no other than his youngest and dearest daughter, who came running up, kissed, and embraced him. And when she saw that he had brought with him a singing, soaring lark, she was beside herself with joy. The father, however, could not rejoice, but began to weep, and said, "My dearest child, I have bought the little bird dear. In return for it, I have been obliged to promise thee to a savage lion, and when he has thee, he will tear thee in pieces and devour thee." And he told her all just as it had happened, and begged her not to go there, come what might. But she consoled him and said, dearest father, indeed, your promise must be fulfilled. I will go thither and soften the lion, so that I may return to thee safely." Next morning, she had the road pointed out to her, took leave, and went fearlessly out into the forest. The lion, however, was an enchanted prince, and was by day a lion, and all his people were lions with him. But in the night they resumed their natural human shapes. On her arrival, she was kindly received and led into the castle. When night came, the lion turned into a handsome man, and their wedding was celebrated with great magnificence. They lived happily together, remained awake at night, and slept in the daytime. One day he came and said, "Tomorrow there is a feast in thy father's house, because your eldest sister is to be married, and if thou art inclined to go there, my lions shall conduct thee." She said, "Yes, I should very much like to see my father again," and went thither accompanied by the lions. There was great joy when she arrived, for they had all believed that she had been torn in pieces by the lion, and had long ceased to live. But she told them what a handsome husband she had, and how well off she was remained with them, while the wedding feast lasted, and then went back again to the forest. When the second daughter was about to be married, and she was again invited to the wedding, she said to the lion, "This time I will not be alone. Thou must come with me." Papa. The lion, however, said that it was too dangerous for him, for if, when there a ray from a burning candle fell on him, he would be changed into a dove, and for 7 years long would have to fly about with the doves. She said, "Ah, but do come with me. I will take great care of thee, and guard thee from all light." So they went away together, and took with them their little child as well. She had a chamber built there so strong and thick that no ray could pierce through it. In this he was to shut himself up when the candles were lit for the wedding feast. But the door was made of green wood, which warped and left a little crack, which no one noticed. The wedding was celebrated with magnificence. But when the procession, with all its candles and torches, came back from church and passed by this apartment, a ray about the breadth of a hair fell on the king's son, and when this ray touched him, he was transformed in an instant. And when she came in and looked for him, she did not see him, but a white dove was sitting there. The dove said to her, "For 7 years must I fly about the world, but at every 7th step that you take, I will let fall a drop of red blood and a white feather, and these will show thee the way. And if thou followest the trace, thou canst release me." Thereupon the dove flew out at the door, and she followed him, and at every 7th step, a red drop of blood and a little white feather fell down and showed her the way. So she went continually, further and further in the wide world, never looking about her or resting, and the 7 years were almost past. Then she rejoiced and thought that they would soon be delivered, and yet they were so far from it. Once when they were thus moving onwards, no little feather and no drop of red blood fell. And when she raised her eyes, the dove had disappeared, and as she thought to herself, "In this no man can help thee," she climbed up to the sun and said to him, "Thou shinest into every crevice, and over every peak. Hast thou not seen a white dove flying?" "No," said the sun, "I have seen none, but I present thee with a casket. Open it when thou art in sorest need." Baya. Then she thanked the sun and went on until evening came and the moon appeared. She then asked her, "Thou shinest the whole night through and on every field and forest. Hast thou not seen a white dove flying?" "No," said the moon, "I have seen no dove. But here I give thee an egg, break it when thou art in great need." She thanked the moon and went on until the night wind came up and blew on her. Then she said to it, "Thou blowest over every tree and under every leaf. Hast thou not seen a white dove flying?" "No," said the night wind, "I have seen none, but I will ask the 3 other winds. Perhaps they have seen it." The east wind and the west wind came and had seen nothing, but the south wind said, "I have seen the white dove. It has flown to the Red Sea, where it has become a lion again. For the 7 years are over, and the lion is there fighting with a dragon. The dragon, however, is an enchanted princess." The night wind then said to her, "I will advise thee. Go to the Red Sea. On the right bank are some tall reeds. Count them. Break off the 11th and strike the dragon with it. Then the lion will be able to subdue it, and both then will regain their human form. After that look round, and thou wilt see the griffin which is by the Red Sea. Swing thyself with thy beloved onto his back, and the bird will carry you over the sea to your own home. Here is a nut for thee. When thou art above the center of the sea, let the nut fall. It will immediately shoot up, and a tall nut tree will grow out of the water on which the griffin may rest. For if he cannot rest, he will not be strong enough to carry you across. And if thou forgettest to throw down the nut, he will let you fall into the sea." Then she went thither and found everything as the night wind had said. She counted the reeds by the sea, and cut off the 11th, struck the dragon therewith, whereupon the lion overcame it, and immediately both of them regained their human shapes. But when the princess who had before been the dragon was delivered from enchantment, she took the youth by the arm, seated herself on the griffin, and carried him off with her. There stood the poor maiden, who had wandered so far and was again forsaken. She sat down and cried, but at last she took courage and said, "Still, I will go as far as the wind blows, and as long as the cock crows, until I find him." And she went forth by long, long roads, until at last she came to the castle where both of them were living together. There she heard that soon a feast was to be held, in which they would celebrate their wedding. But she said, "God still helps me," and opened the casket that the sun had given her. A dress lay therein, as brilliant as the sun itself. So she took it out and put it on, and went up into the castle. And everyone, even the bride herself, looked at her with astonishment. The dress pleased the bride so well that she thought it might do for her wedding dress, and asked if it was for sale. "Not for money or land," answered she, "but for flesh and blood." The bride asked her what she meant by that, so she said, "Let me sleep a night in the chamber where the bridegroom sleeps." The bride would not yet wanted very much to have the dress. At last she consented, but the page was to give the prince a sleeping draught. When it was night, therefore, and the youth was already asleep, she was led into the chamber. She seated herself on the bed and said, "I have followed after thee for 7 years. I have been to the sun and the moon and the 4 winds, and have inquired for thee, and have helped thee against the dragon. Wilt thou then quite forget me?" But the prince slept so soundly that it only seemed to him as if the wind were whistling outside in the fir trees. When therefore day broke, she was led out again, and had to give up the golden dress. And as that even had been of no avail, she was sad, went out into a meadow, sat down there, and wept. While she was sitting there, she thought of the egg which the moon had given her. She opened it, and there came out a clucking hen with 12 chickens, all of gold, and they ran about chirping and crept again under the old hen's wings. Nothing more beautiful was ever seen in the world. Then she arose and drove them through the meadow before her until the bride looked out of the window. The little chickens pleased her so much that she immediately came down and asked if they were for sale, not for money or land, but for flesh and blood. "Let me sleep another night in the chamber where the bridegroom sleeps." The bride said, "Yes," intending to cheat her as on the former evening. But when the prince went to bed, he asked the page what the murmuring and rustling in the night had been. On this the page told all, that he had been forced to give him a sleeping draught, because a poor girl had slept secretly in the chamber, and that he was to give him another that night. The prince said, "Pour out the draught by the bedside." At night she was again led in, and when she began to relate how ill all had fared with her, he immediately recognized his beloved wife. By her voice sprang up and cried, "Now I really am released. I have been, as it were, in a dream, for the strange princess has bewitched me, so that I have been compelled to forget thee. but God has delivered me from the spell at the right time. So then they both left the castle secretly in the night, for they feared the father of the princess, who was a sorcerer, and they seated themselves on the griffin, which bore them across the Red Sea. And when they were in the midst of it, she let fall the nut. Immediately, a tall nut tree grew up, whereon the bird rested, and then carried them home, where they found their child, who had grown tall and beautiful, and they lived thenceforth happily until their death. The Pink. Once in a distant kingdom, there lived a queen to whom God had granted no children. Each morning, with a heart heavy with longing, she wandered into the royal garden, and there beneath the dew-laden leaves and the open sky, she prayed earnestly to heaven. She begged that she might cradle in her arms a son or a daughter, a child of her own blood, to bring light into the palace halls. Day after day, she prayed with steadfast faith, until one morning an angel descended from heaven, radiant and clothed in brightness. The angel spoke gently to her, "Be comforted, noble queen. Thy prayer has been heard. A son shall be given thee, and with him a wondrous gift, the power of wishing. Whatever in all the world he shall desire, it shall be his." The queen's heart overflowed with joy. She hastened to the king with this blessed news, and together they rejoiced in trembling expectation. When the appointed time arrived, the queen bore a son strong and fair, and the king was filled with gladness beyond measure. As the boy grew, the queen took him each morning to the garden where the wild beasts were kept, and she washed herself in the clear stream that flowed there. One day, when the child had grown a little older, she sat with him, cradled in her arms, and lulled by the gentle murmur of the water, she fell into slumber. Then came the old royal cook, a man whose heart was black with envy and cunning. He knew of the child's wondrous gift, and greed stirred within him. Stealthily, he stole the boy away, but not before he slew a hen, sprinkled its blood upon the queen's apron and garments, and ran to the king with wicked accusation. He cried out that the queen had been careless and had let the wild beasts tear her child from her arms. When the king beheld the bloodstains, anger and sorrow seized him. In blind rage, he ordered a high tower to be built, one so desolate that neither sun nor moon could shine within. And into this prison he cast his wife. The walls were sealed, and there she was to remain 7 years, without food or drink, condemned to perish of hunger. Yet God, who is merciful, did not forsake her. From heaven descended 2 angels in the form of white doves, and each day twice they brought her food and drink, so that she was sustained until the 7 bitter years were ended. Meanwhile, the cook carried the boy to a hidden place where a nurse was forced to care for him. But fear gnawed at the cook's heart. If the child grows and learns his power, he may speak against me, and I shall surely meet my ruin. Therefore, he sought to ensnare the boy's gift for himself. When the child could speak, the cook whispered, "Wish for a palace with shining halls and gardens full of splendor." At once, before their very eyes, a magnificent palace arose, adorned with towers and wide courtyards, its gardens blooming with flowers no painter could capture. Not long after, the cook, still scheming, urged the boy to wish for a companion. "It is not fitting for thee to be alone," said he. "Wish for a maiden fair and gentle to share thy days." And the king's son, with innocent heart, wished as the cook advised. In that instant, a maiden appeared so lovely that her beauty surpassed all earthly imagining. The boy and the maiden played together, and their hearts were bound in tender love. But the cook grew restless and afraid, for he feared the boy would one day long for his father and discover the truth. So he called the maiden aside and placed in her hand a sharp knife. "When the boy sleeps tonight," he whispered, "thrust this blade into his heart. Bring me his heart and his tongue, else thou shalt lose thy life." The maiden trembled with horror. When the cook returned the next day and found his command undone, he threatened her again. But she could not lift her hand against the innocent child. Instead, she brought forth a little hind had it slain, and laid its heart and tongue upon a dish. Then she warned the boy, saying, "Lie in thy bed, and cover thyself well." When the cook came and demanded the proof, she gave him the plate. But the boy threw aside the covers, and with stern voice said, "Thou wicked sinner, why soughtest thou my life? Hear now thy sentence. Thou shalt be changed into a black poodle with a golden collar, and thou shalt devour live coals until fire bursts from thy throat." No sooner had he spoken than the cook was transformed into a dog, and the collar of gold shone round his neck. The servants brought burning coals, which the creature was forced to swallow until flames leapt forth from his mouth. The boy remained a while in the splendid palace, but his thoughts turned ever toward his mother. He longed to know whether she still lived. He said to the maiden, "I will return to my country. Wilt thou come with me? If so, I shall provide for thee all thy days." The maiden hesitated. "The road is long, and in thy land I am but a stranger." Yet their love was too deep to sever. So the boy wished that she be transformed into a beautiful pink flower, which he carried with him in his bosom. The black poodle followed at his heels. When he reached the tower where his mother had been imprisoned, he wished for a ladder that reached to its very top. Climbing, he called through the small opening, "Dearest mother, Lady Queen, dost thou live still, or art thou dead?" She answered, thinking angels had come, "I have but now eaten, and am satisfied." Then the boy cried, "I am thy son, whom the cook stole. But I live, and I shall soon deliver thee." Descending, he went to the palace of his father. Disguised as a huntsman, he asked to serve the king. The king, though doubtful, accepted, saying deer had not been seen in his land for many years. But the boy gathered huntsmen, formed them in a wide circle, and wished. At once, 200 deer sprang into the ring, and the huntsmen slew them. 60 carts carried the game to the king, who marveled and rejoiced. The next day, a great feast was held. The king invited all the household and commanded the huntsman to sit beside him. The youth obeyed, though humbly. While he sat there, he wished that someone would speak of the queen in the tower. And suddenly, the marshal said, "We live in joy here, but how fares the queen in her lonely tower? Is she alive, or has she perished?" The king grew wrathful and declared she had let his son be devoured by beasts, and he forbade her name. Then the huntsman rose, saying, "Gracious Lord, Father, I am thy son. Not beasts, but that vile cook stole me from my mother's arms and stained her apron with a hen's blood. Behold the dog with the golden collar, that is the villain himself. Before all eyes, the dog devoured live coals until flames burst forth. Then the son wished him back into his true shape, and there stood the guilty cook with his apron and knife. The king raged and cast him into the dungeon to be torn in pieces. Then the youth brought forth the pink flower, laid it upon the table, and wished it to become the maiden. She stood there in all her beauty, so radiant no painter could match her. The king marveled, and at last sent servants to bring the queen from her tower. She was pale and weak, yet her faith was unbroken. She ate nothing, saying, "The merciful God who sustained me shall soon deliver me." 3 days later, she died peacefully, and the 2 white doves that had fed her followed her to the grave. Grief weighed upon the aged king until he too died not long after. Then the son, now king himself, wedded the maiden, who had once been a flower in his keeping. And whether they live still or not, only God in heaven knows. The Wolf and the Fox. The wolf kept the fox as his unwilling servant, and whatsoever the wolf desired, the fox was forced to obey. For the wolf was the stronger, and the fox the weaker. Yet the fox's heart was never at ease, for he longed with all his cunning to rid himself of his harsh master. But the days passed, and still he remained bound to the wolf by fear. It happened one morning, as they trod a lonely path through the forest, that the wolf halted and fixed his fiery eyes upon the fox. Red Fox growled, "He procure me something to eat at once, or else I will tear thee in pieces and devour thee myself." The fox, trembling but swift of thought, bowed his head and answered, "I know of a farmyard not far hence, where 2 young lambs are kept. If it pleases thee, we may fetch one without delay." The wolf's mouth watered at the thought, and he assented. Together, they went to the place, moving like shadows among the trees, until they reached the fold. There, with stealth and nimbleness, the fox seized one tender lamb and bore it to his master. The wolf fell upon it greedily and devoured it to the bone. But gluttony is never satisfied. Soon he desired the second lamb as well. Alone he crept back, but his paws stumbled and his teeth snapped too loudly. The ewe-mother of the lamb raised a great cry and bleated so wildly that the farmer and his men rushed forth. They found the wolf and beat him without mercy, striking him with cudgels until his sides ached and his legs trembled. Limping and howling, he slunk away and sought the fox. "See how finely thou hast deceived me," he snarled. "I went for the other lamb, and the peasants surprised me. They have beaten me to a jelly." The fox, sly and untroubled, only curled his brush and said, "Why art thou ever such a glutton, master? Hadst thou been content, thou wouldst have come to no harm." The next day, hunger again gnawed at the wolf. Though his side still smarted, his greed was fiercer than his pain. As they wandered over the fields, he growled once more, "Red fox, get me something to eat, or I will eat thee thyself." The fox, who had little desire to be eaten, replied, "I know of a farmhouse where the good wife is baking pancakes this very night. Soft and sweet they are, and easily taken. Let us fetch some for our supper." This plan pleased the wolf. They crept to the house, and the fox circled slyly round it, sniffing the air until he spied where the dish was set to cool. With nimble leaps, he drew down 6 golden pancakes, hot and fragrant, and carried them to the wolf. "Here is somewhat for thee to eat," said he, and then trotted off. The wolf swallowed the cakes in an instant, but their taste only sharpened his craving. "Such dainties make one long for more," cried he, and unable to restrain himself, he rushed clumsily to the dish and tore it down with such violence that it broke into shards. The crash brought the woman running, and when she beheld the wolf, she shrieked and summoned her household. They came with stout sticks and beat him until the wood splintered in their hands. Thus bruised and with 2 lame legs, the wolf dragged himself away, howling piteously, until he found the fox again in the forest. "How abominably thou hast betrayed me," he cried. "The peasants caught me once more, and they have tanned my hide for me." But the fox laughed in his whiskers and said, "Why art thou forever such a glutton, master? Hadst thou been content, no stick would have touched thy back." On the 3rd day, they ventured forth again. The wolf, sore and weary, limped beside the fox, yet hunger burned more fiercely than ever in his belly. At last he groaned, "Red fox, get me something to eat, or I will eat thee thyself." The fox, sly as ever, answered, "I know of a man who hath been slaughtering. His salted meat lies stored in a barrel within the cellar. There is abundance enough to fill thee to bursting. If thou art minded, we shall fetch it," said the wolf. "I will go, but thou must go with me, that thou mayest help me if I cannot escape." The fox agreed and led him through crooked bypaths and secret ways until at length they came to the cellar. There, sure enough, the barrel was filled with salted meat, and the wolf's eyes gleamed. He leapt upon it, at once tearing and gulping, as though he would never cease. "There is time enough yet, thought he, before I need leave off." The fox licked a piece or two, but his cunning never slept. He ran again and again to the hole by which they had entered, slipping through it, and back-testing if his body could still pass out freely. "Why dost thou run to and fro?" asked the wolf between mouthfuls. "Why leap in and out so restlessly?" "I must be watchful," answered the crafty one. "I must see that no one is coming. Do not overfill thy belly, master. Eat not too much." But the wolf only growled, "I shall not stir until the barrel is empty." Meanwhile, the farmer who had heard the fox's scampering came down the steps into the cellar. The fox spied him at once, and with one bound was through the hole and into the free air of the night. The wolf, however, had eaten so greedily that his belly was swollen. He tried to squeeze through the hole, but he stuck fast and could not move forward nor backward. The farmer seized a heavy cudgel and with a furious blow struck the wolf upon the head. Again and again he beat him until the beast lay dead upon the floor. The fox, safe in the shadow of the forest, listened to the sound of the blows and smiled within himself. At last, he was rid of the old glutton and free from his cruel master. And so it befell that the wolf's greed brought him to his end, while the fox, by wit and watchfulness, saved his own skin. The thief and his master. There once lived a man named Hans, who was poor in wealth, but rich in worries. He had but one son, and like many fathers before him, he desired to see the boy established in a trade, so that he might not wander idle through the world. But Hans was uncertain which trade would bring the greatest fortune. In his trouble, he turned, as was common in those days, to the church. He entered quietly, bent his knees before the altar, and prayed earnestly to the Lord God to grant him wisdom. "Show me." "O Lord," said Hans, "what path shall be most prosperous for my son, that he may not starve but live in honor?" Now, as he prayed, the clerk who had hidden himself behind the altar, thinking to make sport, whispered in a sharp voice, "Thieving, thieving." Hans, trembling, believed it to be the answer of heaven itself. He rose from the stone floor, crossed himself, and went home heavy of heart, yet resolved. He said to his son, "My child, the Lord has spoken. You are to learn the craft of thieving, for so it is ordained." The boy, though surprised, trusted his father, and so together they set out to seek a master in so dark an art. They wandered long upon lonely roads, through fields and villages, until at last they came to a vast forest. In the shadow of its trees, they spied a small, crooked house. Within dwelt an old woman, wrinkled and wise, who listened to their tale. "If you seek a teacher," said she, you have come to the right place. My own son is a master thief, skilled beyond all others. He can teach the lad well. Hans, half fearful and half hopeful, spoke with the master thief. Can you truly teach him all there is to know? The man smiled, his eyes gleaming. I can teach him as none else can. But hear the bargain. Return after a year. If you can recognize your son, you shall pay me nothing. If you fail, then you must give me 200 thalers. Hans, bound by the strange command he had received in church, agreed and went home. The boy remained in the forest and learned not only the art of stealing, but witchcraft, cunning transformations, and secrets of shape and shadow. Under the master's care, he grew swift as a fox, watchful as an owl, and sly as a serpent. The year passed swiftly, and Hans, who had counted each day, grew anxious, for he knew not how he might recognize his son again, should magic conceal him. One day, as he walked sorrowful along the road, he met a dwarf, small of stature, but sharp of eye. The little man asked Hans, "Why is your brow so furrowed? And why do you sigh, as though the wind bore all your burdens?" Hans told him of the bargain, and how he feared to lose both his son and his money. The dwarf said, "Take heart. Carry with you a basket of black bread. When you stand beneath the chimney of the master's house, look to the crossbeam. There you will see a basket, and from it a little bird will peep. That bird is none other than your son." Hans followed the counsel. He crept beneath the chimney, set the basket of bread upon the floor, and lo, from the hanging basket, a small bird hopped forth to peck at the crumbs. "Hallo, my son, art thou here?" cried Hans. The bird fluttered with joy, and in a moment the youth stood before him once more. The master thief, who had trusted his spells, grew pale. "The devil must have aided you. No man could have known him otherwise." But Hans clasped his son's hand, saying, "Come, let us go home." And the two set out together. Yet the boy had not learned his arts in vain. As they walked, a grand carriage came rolling by upon the road. "Father," said the youth, "I shall turn into a greyhound. Sell me to the gentleman in the carriage, and you will gain silver. Fear not, for I will return." At once he leapt, and where the boy had stood, a sleek greyhound ran beside Hans. The gentleman, seeing the fine beast, called out, "Good man, will you sell me your dog?" Hans agreed, asking 30 thalers. The price was high, but the gentleman, admiring the dog, paid it. Yet scarcely had the carriage gone a short distance when the hound sprang out of the window and returned to his father, resuming his true shape. The next day was a fair in the town nearby. "Now, father," said the youth, "I will become a splendid horse. Sell me if you can, But mark this, well remove the bridle, or I cannot return to myself." So saying, he transformed into a horse so strong and beautiful that all eyes at the fair turned toward it. Hans led the horse through the crowd, and who should come but the very master thief himself? He gave 100 thalers and claimed the horse, but Hans, in his forgetfulness, left the bridle on its head. The master laughed, drove the horse to his own house, and shut it in the stable. Now, when the maid came across the threshold, the horse spoke in a low voice. "Take off my bridle. Take it off, quickly." The maid, astonished, said, "Canst thou speak?" But her heart was moved, and she loosed the bridle. At once the horse vanished, and in its place a sparrow fluttered up and out into the open air. The master, skilled in wicked arts, turned likewise into a sparrow and gave chase. Higher and higher they flew, till at last they cast lots in the wind. Twice the master lost, and in anger changed himself into a fish diving into the river. But the youth too became a fish swift as silver, and again the master lost. Then the master turned into a cock, crowing loud upon the bank. But the youth, quick of wit, became a fox, and leapt upon him. With sharp teeth he bit off the cock's head, and thus the master thief perished, and has remained dead to this very day. Hans and his son returned home safely, richer in coin and wiser in craft. And though men whispered of the strange things the boy had learned, Hans only said, "What is taught may be turned to good, if a man has wit enough." The gnome. There was once upon a time a rich king who had 3 daughters who daily went to walk in the palace garden. And the king was a great lover of all kinds of fine trees. But there was one for which he had such an affection that if anyone gathered an apple from it, he wished him 100 fathoms underground. And when harvest time came, the apples on this tree were all as red as blood. The 3 daughters went every day beneath the tree and looked to see if the wind had not blown down an apple. But they never by any chance found one, and the tree was so loaded with them that it was almost breaking, and the branches hung down to the ground. Then the king's youngest child had a great desire for an apple, and said to her sisters, "Our father loves us far too much to wish us underground. It is my belief that he would only do that to people who were strangers." And while she was speaking, the child plucked off quite a large apple and ran to her sisters, saying, "Just taste, my dear little sisters, for never in my life have I tasted anything so delightful." Then the 2 other sisters also ate some of the apple, whereupon all 3 sank deep down into the earth, where they could hear no cock crow. When midday came, the king wished to call them to come to dinner, but they were nowhere to be found. He sought them everywhere in the palace and garden, but could not find them. Then he was much troubled, and made known to the whole land that whosoever brought his daughters back again should have one of them to wife. Hereupon, so many young men went about the country in search that there was no counting them, for everyone loved the 3 children, because they were so kind to all, and so fair of face. 3 young huntsmen also went out, and when they had traveled about for 8 days, they arrived at a great castle, in which were beautiful apartments, and in one room a table was laid, on which were delicate dishes, which were still so warm that they were smoking. But in the whole of the castle no human being was either to be seen or heard. They waited there for half a day, and the food still remained warm and smoking. And at length they were so hungry that they sat down and ate, and agreed with each other that they would stay and live in that castle, and that one of them, who should be chosen by casting lots, should remain in the house, and the 2 others seek the king's daughters. They cast lots, and the lot fell on the eldest. So next day the 2 younger went out to seek, and the eldest had to stay home. At midday came a small mannikin, and begged for a piece of bread. Then the huntsman took the bread which he had found there, and cut a round off the loaf, and was about to give it to him. But whilst he was giving it to the mannikin, the latter let it fall, and asked the huntsman to be so good as to give him that piece again. The huntsman was about to do so, and stooped, on which the mannikin took a stick, seized him by the hair, and gave him a good beating. Next day, the second stayed at home, and he fared no better. When the 2 others returned in the evening, the eldest said, "Well, how have you got on?" "Oh, very badly," said he. And then they lamented their misfortune together, but they said nothing about it to the youngest, for they did not like him at all, and always called him Stupid Hans, because he did not exactly belong to the forest. On the 3rd day, the youngest stayed at home, and again the little mannikin came and begged for a piece of bread. When the youth gave it to him, the elf let it fall as before, and asked him to be so good as to give him that piece again. Then said Hans to the little mannikin, "What canst thou not pick up that piece thyself. If thou wilt not take as much trouble as that for thy daily bread, thou dost not deserve to have it. So then the mannikin grew very angry and said he was to do it. But the huntsman would not, and took my dear mannikin and gave him a thorough beating. Then the mannikin screamed terribly and cried, "Stop, stop, and let me go, and I will tell thee where the king's daughters are." When Hans heard that he left off beating him, and the mannikin told him that he was an earth mannikin, and that there were more than 1,000 like him, and that if he would go with him, he would show him where the king's daughters were. Then he showed him a deep well, but there was no water in it. And the elf said that he knew well that the companions Hans had with him did not intend to deal honorably with him. Therefore, if he wished to deliver the king's children, he must do it alone. The two other brothers would also be very glad to recover the king's daughters, but they did not want to have any trouble or danger. Hans was therefore to take a large basket, and he must seat himself in it with his hanger and a bell, and be let down. Below were 3 rooms, and in each of them was a princess with a many-headed dragon, whose heads she was to comb and trim, but he must cut them off. And having said all this, the elf vanished. When it was evening, the 2 brothers came and asked how he had got on, and he said, "Pretty well so far," and that he had seen no one except at midday, when a little mannikin had come and begged for a piece of bread that he had given some to him, but that the mannikin had let it fall and had asked him to pick it up again. But as he did not choose to do that, the elf had begun to lose his temper, and that he had done what he ought not, and had given the elf a beating, on which he had told him where the king's daughters were. Then the 2 were so angry at this that they grew green and yellow. Next morning, they went to the well together and drew lots, who should first seat himself in the basket, and again the lot fell on the eldest, and he was to seat himself in it and take the bell with him. Then he said, "If I ring, you must draw me up again immediately." When he had gone down for a short distance, he rang, and they at once drew him up again. Then the second seated himself in the basket, but he did just the same as the first. And then it was the turn of the youngest, but he let himself be lowered quite to the bottom. When he had got out of the basket, he took his hanger and went and stood outside the first door, and listened, and heard the dragon snoring quite loudly. He opened the door slowly, and one of the princesses was sitting there, and had 9 dragons' heads lying upon her lap, and was combing them. Then he took his hanger and hewed at them, and the 9 fell off. The princess sprang up, threw her arms round his neck, embraced, and kissed him repeatedly, and took her stomacher, which was made of pure gold, and hung it round his neck. Then he went to the second princess, who had a dragon with 5 heads to comb, and delivered her also, and to the youngest, who had a dragon with 4 heads, he went likewise. And they all rejoiced, and embraced him, and kissed him without stopping. Then he rang very loud, so that those above heard him, and he placed the princesses one after the other in the basket, and had them all drawn up. But when it came to his own turn, he remembered the words of the elf, who had told him that his comrades did not mean well by him. So he took a great stone, which was lying there, and placed it in the basket. And when it was about halfway up, his false brothers above cut the rope, so that the basket with the stone fell to the ground, and they thought that he was dead, and ran away with the 3 princesses, making them promise to tell their father that it was they who had delivered them. And then they went to the king, and each demanded a princess in marriage. In the meantime, the youngest huntsman was wandering about the 3 chambers in great trouble, fully expecting to have to end his days there, when he saw hanging on the wall a flute. Then said he, "Why dost thou hang? There no one can be merry here." He looked at the dragon's heads likewise, and said, "You too cannot help me now." He walked backwards and forwards for such a long time that he made the surface of the ground quite smooth. But at last other thoughts came to his mind, and he took the flute from the wall and played a few notes on it. And suddenly a number of elves appeared, and with every note that he sounded, one more came. Then he played until the room was entirely filled. They all asked what he desired, so he said he wished to get above ground, back to daylight, on which they seized him by every hair that grew on his head, and thus they flew with him onto the earth again. When he was above ground, he at once went to the king's palace, just as the wedding of one princess was about to be celebrated, and he went to the room where the king and his 3 daughters were. When the princesses saw him, they fainted. Hereupon the king was angry, and ordered him to be put in prison at once, because he thought he must have done some injury to the children. When the princesses came to themselves, however, they entreated the king to set him free again. The king asked why, and they said that they were not allowed to tell that, but their father said that they were to tell it to the stove. And he went out, listened at the door, and heard everything. Then he caused the two brothers to be hanged on the gallows, and to the third he gave his youngest daughter, and on that occasion I wore a pair of glass shoes, and I struck them against a stone, and they said, "Clink," and were broken. The three children of fortune. Once there was an old man who had grown weary with age, and when he felt his time was short, he called his 3 sons to his side. His voice was frail, but his words carried weight, for they were his last counsel. "My sons," said he, "I have no chest of silver to divide among you, no land, no house, no treasures. All that I can leave are 3 small things, and though they may seem of little worth in them, lies your fortune if you use them wisely. Take them to places where no one has yet seen such marvels, and there you will prosper." Then he gave to the eldest a cock, to the second a scythe, and to the third a cat. Soon after he died, and the brothers prepared themselves for the journey into the wide world. The eldest set out first, carrying the cock. He wandered through towns and villages, but everywhere he went, the creature was already known. In cities, he saw cocks of iron upon steeples, turning with the wind, and in the countryside, he heard their crowing from every farm. People laughed at his pride, for to them the cock was no marvel, and he began to fear that his father's gift was of no use. Yet he did not give up. At length, after long travel, he reached an island where no cock had ever been seen, and the people there lived without knowing the hours of night. They could tell morning from evening, but when darkness fell, if they lay awake, none could say whether dawn was near or far. The young man showed them his bird and said, "Behold this noble creature. See how it bears a crown upon its head like a king, and spurs like a knight upon its feet. Hear how it crows 3 times in the night, at hours that never fail. And when it cries the 3rd time, the sun soon rises. If by day it crows, then mark my words, the weather is about to change." The people marveled greatly. That night, they kept awake, listening with delight as the cock crowed at 2, at 4, and at 6. They rejoiced, for the passing hours had never been made so clear. They asked eagerly whether the bird might be bought, and he answered, "Give me as much gold as an ass can carry." They declared it a small price for so wondrous a thing, and paid it willingly. Laden with treasure, the eldest returned home in triumph. The second brother, seeing this, said, "If my brother has grown rich with his cock, why should I not prosper with my scythe?" So he journeyed forth, carrying the shining blade upon his shoulder. In every land he entered, men already had scythes, and no one marveled at his gift. He wandered long without success. At last he came to an island where men knew nothing of scythes. When their fields of grain were ripe, they dragged out cannons and shot at the stalks. The thunder was dreadful. The smoke darkened the sky, and the harvest was ruined. For some balls flew too high, while others broke only the ears and left the stems standing. Much was lost, and the people grew weary of the toil and noise. Then the brother stepped into the field and swung his scythe. Back and forth he moved, and the stalks fell silently in neat rows. The people stood with mouths open and cried, "This is a marvel." They begged him to part with the tool, and he answered, "Give me a horse laden with as much gold as it can carry." They agreed at once and gave him what he asked. So he too returned home with great wealth. Now the youngest wished to try his fortune with the cat. He fared no better on the mainland than his brothers had at first, for cats were everywhere, and so many that newborn kittens were drowned without pity. He wandered far, but hope dwindled. At last he crossed the sea and came to a kingdom where no man had ever seen such a beast. There the mice held rule, bold, and many running over tables and benches, gnawing at grain cloth and wood. And even in the royal palace, they squeaked in every corner. The king himself was plagued and could find no remedy. But when the cat was loosed, she began her chase swift and silent, and in little time cleared chamber after chamber. The people shouted for joy and begged the king to buy the creature. The king agreed and paid with a mule laden with gold. Thus the youngest returned home, richer than them all. In the palace, the cat lived merrily, and so many mice did she catch that the people could no longer count them. But one day, weary with the chase and parched with thirst, she sat still, lifted her head, and cried, "Mew, mew!" At that cry, the king and his courtiers grew pale with fear, for never before had such a sound been heard. They believed a monster was within their walls. They fled from the palace and called council. "Shall we allow such a beast to dwell among us?" said they. "Better to endure the mice, which we have long suffered, than to risk our lives with this creature." So they sent a noble youth to speak with her and ask if she would leave in peace. But the cat, thirstier than before, only cried, "Mew." The youth trembled, thinking she said, "Most certainly ought. Most certainly ought." He brought this answer back to the king. And the counselors declared, "Then she shall be driven out by force." They wheeled out cannons, and the palace was battered until flames leapt from its windows and towers. The cat leapt lightly from a high window and fled unharmed, but the palace fell into ruin. So it was that 3 sons went out into the world with gifts that seemed of little worth, and each returned with wealth beyond measure. Yet while the cock brought order to time, and the scythe brought peace to the harvest, the cat, though she rid the land of mice, filled the king's heart with terror, and brought his palace to ashes. And to this day, the tale is told of how small gifts, wisely or fearfully received, may shape the fate of kingdoms. The Fox and the Geese. Once upon a time, in a wide green meadow, where the grass grew tall and soft as silk, there dwelt a flock of geese, plump and white with feathers that shone in the sun like polished snow. They wandered together in peace, cropping the tender shoots and drinking from the clear brook that wound its way through the field. The air was mild, the sky was high and blue, and all seemed safe in that quiet pasture. But one morning, when the shadows of the hedgerows were still long upon the ground, there came a fox red of fur and sly of step, padding silently into the meadow. His eyes gleamed like embers beneath his brow, and his teeth shone sharp between his thin lips. When he beheld the geese gathered close, their round bodies heavy with fat, his heart leapt with cunning joy. He smacked his lips, and with a grin he spoke aloud. "Ah, I come in the very nick of time. Here you sit together, so still and trusting, as if you were waiting for me. Now I may eat you, one after another, without the least trouble." The words fell like stones into the stillness of the meadow. The geese started in terror. Their wings beat against the ground. Their long necks stretched upward, and from their throats burst cries of dread. "Gaw, gaw," they cried, filling the meadow with their wailing. They flapped, they stumbled, they huddled together, but the fox stood firm, his grin wide and merciless. "Do not waste your breath," he said, "for there is no mercy to be found in me. Your hour is struck. You must die." The geese trembled, for never before had death stood so near. Yet among them was one goose older than the rest, whose heart, though quaking, held a glimmer of courage. She stretched her neck and spoke. "If we poor geese are indeed to yield up our young and vigorous lives, grant us but one small favor. Let us offer a last prayer to heaven, that we may not depart this world burdened with sin. When we have prayed, we shall stand in a row before you, each in turn, so that you may choose always the fattest for your meal. The fox cocked his head, for though he was cruel, the words seemed fair to him. "Yes," he said at length, "that is a reasonable request, and a pious one as well. Pray as long as you like, and when you are done, I shall take my feast. I am not one to deny devotion, even to my prey." So the geese bowed their heads, and the first among them lifted her voice. She began a long, solemn prayer. Her words were strange, half holy, and half wild, for to the fox's ears they were nothing but the endless cry of "Ga, ga, ga." The fox sat upon his haunches and pricked up his ears, waiting for her to finish. But the goose prayed on without pause, her ga-ga rolling like a bell tolling over the meadow. The second goose grew restless. She would not wait her turn, but began her own prayer at T, lifting her voice to heaven in a loud gaga. The third followed, and the fourth, and soon the whole flock was cackling together, their cries filling the field, echoing in the hedges, and rising like a great storm of noise. The fox twitched his tail. He licked his lips. He shifted his paws. Yet still the geese prayed on, never ceasing, never yielding a single breath for silence. And so they stand to this day, praying with all their might, while the fox, weary of waiting, paces to and fro, with hunger gnawing his belly. Thus, the tale tells us, when the geese have finished their prayers, the story shall continue further. But for now, they pray without end, their voices rising forever into the sky, and the fox must wait, lean and restless, for his supper that never comes. The water-nix. Once upon a time, in a quiet village surrounded by meadows and dark woods, there lived a little brother and a little sister. They were poor children, yet bright and merry, and they passed their days in simple play. One summer's afternoon, when the sun glowed upon the thatched roofs and the swallows dipped low above the fields, the two children wandered toward a moss-grown well at the edge of the forest. The water shimmered like glass, and they laughed as they tossed pebbles and splashed with their hands. But while they bent too far in their play, both slipped and tumbled headlong into the depths. Now in that well there dwelt a water-nix, a spirit of the deep. She was ancient, and her eyes gleamed like green glass in the dark water. When the children fell, she seized them with her cold hands and cried, "Now I have you, and never shall you return to the sunlit world. You shall serve me and work until your bones ache." With that, she bore them down to her hidden dwelling beneath the waters. Life there was cruel and heavy. The nix gave the little girl a heap of filthy, tangled flax and bade her spin it until it shone like silver, though no spindle could tame such knots. She commanded her also to fetch water in a bucket full of holes so that not a drop would ever stay inside. And she set the boy to cut down a mighty oak with a blunt axe that scarcely bit the bark. Day after day, they toiled and wept, and for their pains they were given naught but dumplings, hard as stone, which neither teeth nor hunger could soften. So the children grew thin and sorrowful, yet still they whispered hope to one another in the dark. At last, when their hearts could endure no more, they laid a secret plan. They watched and waited until one Sunday, when the water-nix rose from her dwelling and went up to the world above to sit in church, as spirits sometimes do. Then the children clasped hands, their hearts beating like drums, and they fled. When the church service ended and the nix returned, she found her chambers empty and the children gone. At once her wrath blazed, and she rose with giant strides after them. Her steps were like the rushing of floods, and the earth quaked beneath her as she came. The children, running for their lives, looked back and saw her fierce shape drawing near. Quick-witted, the sister cast behind her a small brush she had carried in her pocket. At once, the brush grew into a great hill, bristling with thousands upon thousands of sharp spikes. Each spike was long and cruel, and the nix was forced to clamber and crawl, her skin torn and her garments rent. Though it cost her sorely at last, she pressed through. When the children beheld this, their fear doubled, and the brother flung down the comb from his pouch. At once there sprang up a hill made of combs, 1,000 times, 1,000 teeth, pointing upward, sharp and unyielding. Yet the nix balanced herself with dreadful skill, and step by step she crossed that strange mountain. Also, still, the children did not falter. The sister seized her little looking-glass and with trembling hands hurled it behind her. Then arose a hill of mirrors, glittering and smooth as ice. It shone with 100,000 faces of the fleeing children and the furious nix. The slope was steep and so slippery that no foot could hold fast upon it. The nix tried once, then twice, but slid back with a cry of rage. At last she said, "I will fetch my axe and hew this hill in twain. Then nothing shall hinder me." So she turned back to her well to fetch the axe of iron. But long before she returned and struck even a single blow, the brother and sister had run far, far away, across fields and forests, until the sound of the rushing water faded, and the open sky was above them once more. Weary but free, they gave thanks for their deliverance, while the nix, beaten at last, was forced to creep back into her dark dwelling there, to brood in silence at the bottom of her well. And so the little brother and sister were never seen by her again, but dwelt happily together, wiser and stronger for all the hardships they had endured. The Rabbit's Bride. There was once a woman, a widow, who lived with her only daughter in a garden that was famed throughout the village. The garden was rich and green, full of strong cabbages, with wide, dark leaves that shone when the morning dew lay upon them. It was the widow's pride and her daughter's delight, for from these cabbages they cooked their soups, and from these cabbages they sold at market enough to keep hunger from their door. But one day there came a rabbit, quick and clever, with long ears and bright eyes, who found his way among the cabbages. He nibbled here and he nibbled there until the leaves were torn and the stalks stood bare. The woman wrung her hands in sorrow and cried to her daughter, "Go, child, go into the garden and drive out the rabbit, else we shall have nothing left." So the maiden went, and she called out, "Shoo, shoo, do not eat up all our cabbages, little rabbit." But the rabbit sat up on his haunches, and his whiskers twitched as he spoke in a soft, coaxing voice. "Come, fair maiden, come with me. Sit upon my tail, and I will carry you away to my rabbit hutch." Yet the maiden shook her head, for she was afraid, and she ran back to her mother. The very next day back came the rabbit. Again he ate and gnawed and feasted on the green leaves. And again the poor woman said, "Child, go into the garden and drive him away, else he will leave us nothing." So the maiden went, and she cried, "Shoo, shoo, do not eat up all our cabbages, little rabbit." But once more the rabbit answered, "Come, fair maiden, come with me. Sit upon my tail, and I will carry you away to my rabbit hutch." And once more the maiden refused and ran quickly into the house. But rabbits are creatures of stubborn will, and on the third day the same rabbit came again, bold as ever. He hopped through the rows, tore at the hearts of the cabbages, and cared nothing for the poor woman's toil. So again the mother said, "Go, daughter, into the garden and chase away that wicked rabbit." The maiden went, and as she stood among the ruined stalks, she called again, "Shoo, shoo, do not eat up all our cabbages." Little rabbit, the rabbit rose tall and said once more with gleaming eyes, "Come, maiden, come with me. Sit upon my tail, and I will carry you away to my rabbit hutch." This time, weary and frightened, the girl did as he bade. She seated herself upon the soft fur of his tail, and the rabbit bounded away with her, swift as the wind through field and hedge and wood, until they came to his dwelling, deep and hidden. "Now," said the rabbit, "set the fire and cook bran and cabbage, for soon I will bid the wedding guests." The maiden's heart was heavy, but she did as she was told. She stirred the bran, and she cut the cabbage, though her tears fell into the pot. Not long after, the guests began to arrive. Would you know who they were? All the hares of the forest, great and small, came skipping and thumping their ears, tall, and their eyes red as berries. Then came the crow, black and solemn, who was to be the parson to marry them, and the fox, sly and smooth, came to be the clerk and keep the book. The altar was set beneath the arch of a rainbow, bright and trembling above the hut. Yet the maiden was not merry. She sat by the fire, her eyes red with weeping, for she was lonely and far from her mother. "Get up! Get up!" cried the rabbit. "The wedding folk are waiting, and all are glad." But the bride only wept and said not a word. The rabbit went out, then soon returned again. "Get up! Get up! The wedding folk are waiting." But still she wept and said nothing. Then, while the rabbit was away, she took straw and fashioned a figure. She dressed it in her own clothes, gave it her kerchief, and with red paint she made it a mouth. She set it by the fire to watch the pot of bran, and then, as quickly as her feet would carry her, she fled from the hutch and found her way back to her mother's house. When the rabbit came once more, he cried again, "Get up! Get up! The wedding folk are waiting." He stepped to the figure, and he struck it on the head, thinking to rouse it. But the figure tumbled down. Then the rabbit was struck with dread. He believed his bride was dead slain before the wedding feast. So he went away heavy in heart, and all the hares and beasts that had gathered melted into the forest, and the rainbow faded from the sky, and the maiden sat once more with her mother in the little house beside the ruined garden. And though the cabbages never grew as fine again, she was safe, and she never followed a rabbit more.